Welcome to this new episode of our Student Spotlight series, where we're able to showcase some of the work our past students have done. I'm Charlotte. I'm one of the outreach coordinators here at CCIR, and it's our pleasure today to have Augustine with us, who did one of our Future Scholars Program courses. So before we talk about your course, can you just briefly introduce yourself? So tell us where you're from, what year you are in school, and then what made you seek out CCIR and what your course was about.
Okay, my name is Augustine. I'm from Singapore, and I'm year in terms of I graduated high school last year, so I'm 19 this year, and I'm currently doing fulfilling my national service, which is a kind of mandatory conscription in Singapore.
Great. And then which course in the Future Scholars Program did you take?
Uh, I took the international development course, and apologies for not answering your question earlier. I sought out the course because I have a lot of what I did and a lot of what I studied in school was about development in the Southeast Asian context. And, in terms of like economic development, political development, and this kind of, uh, the kind of policies that were used to bring about the growth that we see in the region today. And on a personal level, I do also deal a lot with vulnerable communities and engage a lot with the policies that are used to help them. And so when I saw the course and its description and the reputation of the Dr. Dana Brablek, who was teaching it, I thought that this would be a fantastic opportunity to be able to develop my skills as a someone who can critique uh, development policies and you know eventually or even in the course to suggest a sustainable growth policy that would be achievable for countries in the region.
Great. And then now we will talk a little bit about your specific research project. So can you tell us what your research project was about and how you came to decide on that topic?
Okay, so my research project is called Measuring Success, Evaluating Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Development Policies as a Model for Degrowth in Developing Nations. Now, I think my interest in degrowth was piqued in the entrance interview for CCIR, where one of the professors mentioned to me that degrowth is a very up and coming topic, right? And it's a topic that's gaining increased relevance today because of the harmful impact that our growth-based economies have been causing on the environment, on our people, and just our entire ecosystem as a whole. And I initially I did want to do it in relation to minorities because I thought that degrowth in the context of minorities is a very important, is a very applicable means of evaluating growth policies and the harms of growth policies. But I think that, you know, doing this kind of research on a topic that is so widely debated and so, I wouldn't say controversial, but so, um, yeah, widely debated, right? Uh, was going to be very difficult to do. And I think that is something that my TA brought up, and to some extent, even my professor, because they're doing research on degrowth it's like, what is degrowth, right? It's very hard to answer the question of what is degrowth. And, if you're going to suggest policies on how to improve the lives of minorities in uh, Southeast Asia using a degrowth framework, you have to first evaluate what a degrowth framework is. And so that's where I brought in the case study of Bhutan, because Bhutan is a very, very unique country with a very unique economic policy, right? It's called the EDP, the Economic Development uh, Program, and they basically incorporate multiple metrics of development, right? Not just gross domestic product, but also gross national happiness and greenhouse gas emissions, which are all very relevant, uh, especially in uh, developing a sustainable development development pathway. And I think that's one of the ways that I was able to shape my research paper into focusing more on Bhutan and being able to see whether, its policies can be, in a way, a better measure or better pathway for degrowth to occur within the context of Southeast Asia.
And then that was actually going to be my next question for you is for people watching, can you give us a little insight into what degrowth is and what that means? And then, yeah, which I know you just said it's complicated, but just a brief insight.
Okay, so degrowth is, allow me to refer to something here. Degrowth is essentially, it can be considered to be a voluntary transition to a just, participatory, and ecologically sustainable society, and can be seen as a process that the wealthiest countries should go through in order to right-size their economies, in both national economies and the global economy. And a lot of this has to do with the idea of human well-being, which is degrowth should be is prioritized on maximizing human well-being as opposed to GDP, which is what our current economies are focused on. And I think that we're seeing an increasing disparity in the connection that these two have, right? As GDP gets higher, so does inequality, and this leads to a huge disparity in the well-being of those at the top and those at the bottom. And I think that this is what really degrowth is, one of the problems that degrowth is trying to fix, which is inequality. And the other one is also the impact on the ecosystem. So degrowth is aimed at trying to allow humans to maximize their well-being within their biophysical limits, right? Which is to say, not living in a way that doesn't pollute our waters, that doesn't harm our ecosystems, that keeps a certain level, that keeps a high level of biodiversity in the habitats that we extract from, right? Which means no overconsumption, no over-extraction. And this is the key principles of degrowth that I think are useful, that truly define degrowth as a movement and as a principle.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So then you said your research project focused specifically on Bhutan, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us what were your research methods? What type of paper did you do? And then what was that process like of collecting that data?
Okay, so the type of research paper that I did was mostly one of trying to fit the development plan of Bhutan within within the sphere of what researchers consider to be degrowth proposals and degrowth policies, right? It's basically trying to justify that what Bhutan is doing is degrowth, right? And the trouble with degrowth is that it can be slightly, some people see it as a very radical framework where every country needs to have, or a majority of countries need to follow the framework in order to succeed globally, right? Where the largest countries downsize while the developing countries are able to catch up in terms of GDP and other metrics, right? And I I found that this isn't so practical, and that as a movement, degrowth should try to focus on on what can be achieved, especially given the context that we are living in, right? We're living in a globalized and capitalist world where things like GDP, trade, and other sorts of the metrics that improve our gross domestic product are emphasized. And so Bhutan really stands out because they don't only focus on GDP. And I might even argue that that might not be the main indicator for Bhutan. Like, no doubt, Bhutan has seen GDP growth, has seen significant GDP growth. Um, but it doesn't mean that the growth that they did, that they achieved, comes at the cost of the environment or at the cost of its people, right? And that's what I was trying to argue in the paper. And so once I established that, I also tried to apply it to another context. As a brief mention, of course, which is East Kalimantan. Um, with regards to the extreme deforestation that's occurring there, I tried to link it to how I tried to link Bhutan's policies and its version of how degrowth and how degrowth policies might sorry as and how Bhutan's policies might be seen as degrowth and apply it to a country like a region like East Kalimantan that's so heavily reliant on extractive industries. And so that's really what my paper focused on, was how the degrowth policies that were seen in Bhutan, in my perspective, of course, uh, could set a framework for a sustainable development pathway for a region such as East Kalimantan.
That's very interesting. I think something like sustainable development is so important, especially as you mentioned, with, as capitalism rises and GDP rises,
Mm.
inequality grows. And that's only going to get worse if things don't change, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
don't mind me just interjecting. I think I'm just going to make a very short statement. It's that in trying to maximize Bhutan's own happiness, they they saw GDP as a way to achieve that rather than as the end goal.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. And then did you know this about Bhutan before getting into your research project, or was this something completely surprising to you?
I knew about Bhutan's national happiness index. I think it's very well known for being the only country in the world that does that. But it's also but I also learned a lot about its policies throughout the course. And throughout the research that I did with the access of, with the help of the access that CCIR gave me to a lot of the papers on the topic. And so, I found out about its EDP, its economic development program, economic development policy that helped to integrate the three factors I talked about, which is gross national happiness, GDP, and greenhouse gas emissions. And, this was really something that I learned about, that, gross national happiness is just one aspect of this um, trinity, right?
Mm,
That is used to determine Bhutanese development policy. And, I was also struck by how well they were able to achieve higher levels of satisfaction and happiness without sacrificing, their environment. Because Bhutan has some incredible forest cover around 70s, I think about 70%, if I'm not wrong. And yeah, that's something that I managed to learn from, the further research that I did.
interesting. And it makes sense why they are so keen to protect their environment.
Mm.
Um, so my last question about your specific research topic, was there anything throughout your research process that made you change your perspectives related to the topic, or or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that when I initially wanted to write about degrowth and how it impacted, you know, the people in Southeast Asia, I was really, really hyper focused on trying to get a conclusion about degrowth, right? That, it's feasible and it's doable and, um, it should be implemented, right? And, you know, to some extent, I did manage to get this conclusion, but I also had to acknowledge a lot of, you know, a lot of potential limitations, and even how, other potential frameworks might actually be better for the region, right? Because the current definition of degrowth is so wide, you have to narrow it down, right? And you also have things like green growth and what's and continuing with GDP, with GDP focused development policies, right? And so one of the things that I had to that my perspective really changed about was, I think, the feasibility of degrowth, and also, you know, the my confidence in its applicability, right? And being able to shift my perspective from being so narrow-minded as to trying to fix a conclusion towards being one that's more exploratory, one that's more aimed at trying to find out whether Bhutan's growth policies are even degrowth in the first place, right? And so I think that's what the course has really taught me to be. It's, to open up your mind, right? And try not to go into your research with trying to find predetermined conclusions, right? To try and really explore the question in a way that gives you a better understanding of the topic than how you would have otherwise, or how you would have, simply going at the research on your own, just trying to find the answers to your specific question that suit your taste, because that's not the way that research works.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, letting the data, speak to you rather than trying to search for your answers. So now we're going to shift into discussing just your general experience with the Future Scholars Program and with CCIR. So firstly, can you tell us what your experience was like doing this program and your course specifically, as a high school student or before university? What was it like compared to other courses or past projects that you've done?
I think that, okay, so for context, I did go to NUS before to study a course in geopolitics for about 3 to 4 months. And that was a graded exam on my A-level certificate, right? So that was fairly stressful, and, even though, and, fairly stressful, and a lot of assignments. And I think that it was a taught course, and it was like a course with a set curriculum. So it was a bit constricting in terms of what you could learn. And although I enjoyed it, I didn't really manage to focus on the topics that I really liked. And I think that's the difference between going for a course like that and, and a course like CCIR, which is, the freedom to explore what you want to do, of course, within the context of international development. And that's really what sets this course apart. And it's not just that, but also the help that you get from your professors and the TA. Dr. Dana Braubeck was absolutely incredibly helpful. I think that the time I had in discussing topics with her, both in class and also with like the separate calls that I had with her, were really, really instrumental in shaping my research paper and widening my perspective, as I mentioned, to avoid being narrow-minded. And, Omar, my TA, was also really, really helpful. And I think he was someone from a philosophy background, and that was really important in giving another dimension to my paper, which is to explore the meaning of degrowth, right? I think that that's something that's very on track with his philosophy, his philosophical thinking, is to break down what things actually mean, right? And that's what really set my research paper in this direction, and that's something that I really appreciated about CCR, and that I don't think I could have gotten anywhere else. Yeah.
I think that's a great response. I think that leads us nicely into this next question. So for viewers watching, one of the things that we really like to emphasize in both of our programs is the aspect of mentorship, as opposed to just teachers, where our mentors don't just transfer information onto you as a student, but really guide you through your own discoveries and learning process, as you mentioned. So can you tell us what it was like what your experience was like as you moved through the first research half of the course and then into the second the first teaching half of the course and then into the second part of the course where you focus more on your research. What was it like and how did your mentors help guide you through that process?
Hmm. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So can you tell us what it was like? So the first half of the Future Scholars program, you do a lot more learning about the subject and all of that, and then you each branch off into your own research topics. So can you tell us what it was like going from the learning aspect into the research aspect, and then how your mentors kind of helped you transition through that?
Hmm. I think it's important to start off with a bit of like positionality. We all come in with our preconceived ideas, with an understanding of our context, around context around us that nobody else understands. And so when Dr. Dana went through the lectures, um, she um, she emphasized applying what she was teaching to our own specific context, right? And that's what I think gave the foundation for what we were learning, uh, especially in relation to some of the earlier topics. Um, and I think that this is really something that is necessary for you to be able to have before you start writing your research paper and before you start, exploring what you want to do, right? Is to have an understanding of the key basic concepts of international development and trying to apply them and thinking about it and trying to apply it to your own context before you go out and try to, do a whole big research paper, right? And that's where you transition into the second part where Dr. Dana Brobleck still continues with the lectures, but you also start to see a lot more involvement from the TA in editing your own personal work, right? This is where I think I got a lot of help in shaping my work, in trying to see how I could best go about trying to analyze degrowth in a way that would be beneficial to those looking to seek alternative development pathways, right? Because that is the end goal, is to have an impact with the work that I do. And so what I managed to learn from the second part of the course was to write in an effective way in a research paper, and also how to shape my research paper in a way that would, suit my key end goals, not specifically about not specifically my preconceived notions about the growth, but about what I wanted to do with my paper in the end. And yeah, and with Dr. Dana Broblecht as a more of a subject matter expert, it would be easier. It was also a lot easier to see how I could shape my project more outside of more of a methodological point of view and more of a content point of view. Yeah.
Great. And then the next question is about what it was like for you working with the other students in your course. So just for the listeners, with our Future Scholars program, we cap each course at 5 students. So it's a very tight-knit group. So can you tell us what it was like working with other students? Where were they from? Yeah, and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. So we had, well, 4 other students in my case. There were 5 students all in all. One was from China, one was from Hong Kong, one was from Japan, and the last was from Turkey. Um, Funnily enough, I was the only guy. But one I think one of the classmates that I remember the most would be Sanem from Turkey. I think she gave a lot of very interesting points, and she was writing about a paper about how you know, um, the politics, like the media politics of immigration and how it affected actual policies. I found that to be really interesting, right? Because you get a perspective that you wouldn't otherwise have gotten. For me, I love Southeast Asia and I love thinking about our policies and our development. But hearing about a region that I never heard of before, specifically, she was writing about France, uh, was really, really interesting because, I don't hear a lot about French politics or about their immigration problems or about their national unity problems. And so it was really great to see and hear other people's perspectives on their own issues. And, eventually I hope to get to read her paper as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the benefits of the Future Scholars Program is that you do get to connect with students from all around the world, which you really had a cohort of students all around the world,
Yeah.
which is cool. And then you also get to, like you said, hear perspectives and ideas that you wouldn't necessarily think of, but that are still super intertwined with your own and within the topic that you're doing. So just a few more questions for you. The first one is, has this course given you any insights into your future? Has it informed or maybe shaped how you think of your path moving forward at all?
I mean, from the very beginning, I really enjoyed politics. I think from the time I was studying at National University of Singapore, specifically geopolitics, to now focusing on international development, I think it was a very natural transition in terms of what I was doing, what I was studying, what I was researching, and you know, rather, I suppose this course has given me a more economic point of view, a more you know uh sustainable like green like sustainable development point of view, because in the past you're talking about war, about nationalism, but now you're talking about you know extractive industries, about pollution, about a different set of topics that are still related to um politics and development. And it not so much as it changed my um future ambitions and what I like to do, but rather to simply augment it. Now I have a deeper interest in economics, particularly sustainable economics, rather than simply the pure study of war and um, geopolitics, right? And so my future ambition now would to have um, a broad understanding of the world, uh, particularly to study PPE in the UK. I think that would be a really great option for me because you get the politics and the economics along with the philosophy that Omar was really passionate about, right? And that's something, and this course has really just reaffirmed what I really want to do and has made me discover that I really love learning about development in more than just one way.
I think that's great and great that it was able to solidify that for you. So my last question is, what would you say to someone who asked you what the value of doing a project or a program like this is, especially for a high school student?
Some of the benefits, I think, is just the mentorship, as you mentioned, right? Because you don't really get these kind of opportunities outside of university, right? And um, not just that, like from one of the best universities in the world, you know. And I think that really showed when you talked to Dr. Dana Broblek. Like she was not only really knowledgeable, which I'm sure many professors are, but she was also really, really passionate and really willing to help students like me, students who, really care about their societies and really want to bring about change. And, I think she saw that in me and was really, really willing to help. Right. And I think, um, some of the office hours or that I took with her were outside, outside of her home in a cafe, right? Which means to show that she really slotted me right into her busy schedule. And that I think that really touched me because you don't get this kind of opportunity elsewhere. Maybe not even in university, right? And I think that having the experience of writing a paper alongside such distinguished individuals and having the opportunity to publish it once it's done is something that's really amazing and um, you know, speaks to my desire to have an impact on the world and not just through my actions, but also through my work and my research and in what I discover.
I think that's really, really great insight, and a great place to leave off. So thank you so much again for chatting with me and congratulations on your nomination to our Spotlight series.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Okay. So they'll just pause the recording there, but just again, want to say thank you. This should be edited and uploaded within the next few weeks or so, onto our social medias, our YouTube channel and our Instagram.
Yeah, apologies for the stuttering. Apologies to the editor for the stuttering.
No worries. No worries. Okay, thanks so much. Have a good
Thank you so
one.
much, Charlotte. You too. Bye bye.